All right, so just a second ago, we introduced two ideas. One called Keynesian economics, which again is the idea that in a market economy, the federal government has the ability and should smooth out booms and busts in what we sometimes call the business cycle. The business cycle is represented here by periods of expansion above the measure of long-term economic growth, and of recession, of contraction, below the average long-term economic growth. Keynesian economic holds that rather than booms and busts, we want to try and stick to a kind of smoother business cycle curve. And we introduced an idea called aggregate demand. What aggregate means is that's the total. So think for the entire economy of the United States. This is not just one business, one household, anything like that, but for the entire economy of the United States, the idea is if we increase the demand, we can move this line higher, and if we decrease the aggregate demand, we can move it lower, okay? So how do we do that? There are two bodies that I kind of want to talk about that have the ability within the United States in our system to influence, to either grow or shrink aggregate demand. One of them, the first here at the bottom, is called the Federal Reserve System. And I'm just going to kind of go over this really quickly because this is really kind of a pretty big topic and I don't want to get too bogged down in this. So the Federal Reserve, which was founded in 1912, has the ability to set interest rates in the United States. So for anyone that has a bank account, you know that over time, your money hopefully becomes worth just a little bit more. That's known as interest, it's a percentage. But nationwide, there's not just those little bank accounts with interest. The Federal Reserve also has the ability to, at a very high level, set interest rates. Why would it want to set higher or low interest rates? Now, for example, in a recession, at this part of the business cycle, remember, unemployment is high, spending is low, people are afraid to spend money, they're probably like socking it away in the bank. The Federal Reserve has the ability to lower the interest rate. Now, if interest rates are really low, you kind of don't get anything for your money by just leaving it in the bank. You're not going to get as much investing either. So what this is going to do is it's going to encourage spending money right now. All right, don't keep it in the bank, don't keep it under your mattress, that's a terrible idea. If interest rates are really low, they're gonna say either spend it, get into the economy, do something. Through doing all of that, it's going to increase, hopefully, aggregate demand, okay? Now, on the other hand, remember we talked about the problems of what's sometimes called really high inflation. When kind of the economy is going really, really crazy up here in expansion, there might actually be times where the Federal Reserve is gonna say, hey, we're actually gonna raise interest rates a little bit. It's gonna encourage people to save their money. It's gonna encourage people to invest. And that's hopefully gonna decrease some of that inflation where your money becomes worth less. And it's also going to hopefully decrease the aggregate demand in this economy, okay? So that's just the Federal Reserve. The next group that I wanna talk about that has the ability to influence aggregate demand in the United States, the most important one is the United States Congress, okay? So as you can see, I've got how to grow aggregate demand for dummies, which is Congress. So Congress, their main ability to do this is it is their responsibility to set the budget in the United States. They have what's sometimes called the power of the purse. They levy income taxes. They are the ones who decide how much to spend on Social Security, on the military, on healthcare, on all of these different government programs, all right? I'm gonna talk just for a second about growing aggregate demand. So let's imagine again, we're in a recession. The Great Depression is a great example of this. Began in 1929, lasted a really long time. Things were really yucky. High unemployment, low GDP, low exports, factories are not turning anything out. The government has this Congress I'm talking about, has two main ways in which they can hopefully stimulate aggregate demand, get that economy kickstarted and running again. Number one is by simply increasing government spending, okay? So we're gonna increase government spending. What this is going to do is it's gonna result in higher bills for the government. Yes, we're racking up debt and we have to pay for that. Now, government spending can take many forms. It can entail spending money on the military. It can entail spending money on creating infrastructure, such as dams and bridges and schools, right? It can entail social welfare programs. That's government spending. What all of these have the mean effect of doing is they are going to put more money into the economy, and with hopefully the idea in these infrastructure programs, they're also going to give people jobs, all right? If I'm going to pay a bunch of workers $50,000 a year in order to construct a dam, well, number one, I gave a whole bunch of people jobs who used to be unemployed, and at the end of it, hey, you have a dam, which is really nice. The other way, and this is a Keynesian concept, to grow aggregate demand is to lower taxes, all right? Now again, just as this had maybe the issue of increasing government spending is going to mean higher bills for the government, decreasing the taxes you collect, well, that's less revenue for the government too. But again, Keynesian economics and aggregate demand tells us that by having more money in the economy, by having more cash in people's pockets, ideally that's going to stimulate aggregate demand, all right? Now, I'm not going to get into much of which one of these two ideas is more effective. I will tell you that since around the 1930s, the more liberal wings of the government have often tried to take this plank to say this is how we want to stimulate economic growth. This, for example, is what FDR's New Deal was based on. The US was in a recession, so we're going to spend money, we're going to put people to work building schools, dams, parks, all of that good stuff. It's going to hopefully raise the aggregate demand, get things moving, right? Oftentimes, some more conservative elements in society, which in the past couple decades has been the Republican Party, has said, we don't want to focus on that. We want to focus on lowering taxes in order to increase aggregate demand, all right? So these are two ways that under Keynesian economics, both of these are totally legitimate ways to get us out of these recessions and smooth out the business cycle, okay? We're gonna pause for right there.